Hi, this is the second part of a presentation that I'm calling Quantum Tunneling, Miracles, and the Laws We Live By, a journey into perception and possibility. Chapter 8, Perception and Belief. Are we all guilty or are we all innocent? Let's go deeper into the question that quietly underlies every conversation about quantum mechanics, miracles, and perception. Are we all guilty or are we all innocent? This binary question isn't just philosophical, it's perceptual. What you believe about this will shape how you see the world. It will determine the kinds of laws you think apply to you. And just like quantum particles appear to behave differently when observed, your own life, your possibilities, limitations, and even your suffering will mirror your belief. Let's look first through the lens of universal guilt, and then we'll switch and look through the lens of universal innocence. Same world, very different interface. Let's carry on with the next couple chapters being a choose-your-own adventure. You have to accept that either guilt is a foundational and universal truth, or that innocence is a foundational and universal truth. Chapter 9. The world is a reflection of guilt. When you start with the belief that we are all guilty, your interface to the world is tuned for punishment. Guilt, especially unconscious guilt, demands correction. And if you don't believe that forgiveness is possible, rather you believe that correction must come as punishment, either from others, from a godlike authority, or from life itself, this is not just a psychological condition, it becomes a perceptual one. It sets the parameters of the world you see. ACIM states it plainly: projection makes perception. If guilt is projected outward, the world becomes the screen upon which fear, separation, and punishment are painted. It's not metaphorical, it's perceptual physics. The mind, like a quantum field, collapses possibilities into form based on the belief it holds. Now revisit quantum tunneling under this framework. A particle that cheats the rules by slipping through a barrier can be deeply disturbing if you live in a reality that punishes transgressions. The idea that a particle could break the law of classical physics and not suffer for it triggers the ego's enforcement system. In a guilt-based framework, such quantum behavior is often dismissed or domesticated. We look for ways to preserve the causality chain, to limit the scope of the miracle. It must be probabilistic noise, we say, or we'll find the deterministic rule eventually. Why? Because the ego's world is a courtroom, and guilt must be followed by consequence. Hermeticism's principle of cause and effect always gets interpreted in this way. You did something wrong and now you'll pay. Even karma, as popularly understood, becomes a cosmic punishment mechanism in the hands of a guilty interpreter. In this mindset, forgiveness seems naive. Miracles seem impossible or unfair. The very idea of a particle tunneling for free becomes offensive to the mind that believes in just desserts. Donald Hoffman's interface theory suggests that we don't see reality, we see a useful interface. But in a guilt-based paradigm, the interface becomes a prison. The icons we see are there to keep us in line, not liberate us. Spacetime becomes a maze, and we are the rats being shocked for wandering too far. And since our perceptions shape what we believe is possible, we never even try to do what might be miraculous. We don't believe we deserve it. Our possibilities shrink, our hearts constrict, our minds get stuck on the side of the barrier, never imagining they could tunnel through. There's a kind of emotional wave function in play here. Every moment has multiple emotional outcomes, love or fear. Trust or attack. A mind that believes in guilt is like a quantum observer who always chooses the collapsed state of punishment, lack, and defense. The other possibilities, peace, joy, innocence, are never selected. The system remains in a loop of guilt and reaction. This isn't to say these perceptions are wrong, they're accurate reflections of the chosen framework, like a particle in a probability cloud. Every moment holds multiple outcomes. But your belief will collapse the wave in one direction or the other. Chapter 10. The world as a reflection of innocence. Now imagine a radical shift. You start with the belief that we are all innocent. Innocence in this context isn't naivete. It's a recognition that at the level of the mind, not the body, we are still as God created us, whole, loved, and eternal. From the ACIM perspective, guilt is an illusion maintained by projection. Forgiveness is the correction, not of sin, but of the illusion that anything truly wrong could occur in the eternal. When this becomes your perceptual foundation, the interface transforms, the icons rearrange. The same quantum tunneling experiment suddenly becomes a demonstration, not a violation. The particle's freedom becomes your own. From this vantage point, the tunneling particle is like a soul returning to its source. The barrier represents guilt, fear, and separation, and yet the wave function of the particle, its deeper nature, never accepted the barrier as real. It passed through, not by force, but by its nature. And that's how miracles work in ACIM. They're not magic, they're natural consequences of choosing to align with the Holy Spirit's perception, a perception grounded in innocence and unity. The miracle doesn't force the laws of physics to break. It reveals that the laws we thought were unbreakable were just part of the interface. The deeper law, the law of love, was always operating underneath. The Hermetic principle of vibration tells us that everything is in motion, and higher vibrational states correspond to higher truths. Guilt is a low-frequency distortion. Innocence is a high-frequency alignment. From the high vibrational frequency of innocence, everything looks different. The principle of correspondence, as above, so below, no longer links us to pain, but to beauty. We see love in the mirror of the world. We become the tunneling wave that moves freely, not because we have enough force, but because we've stopped believing in the wall. The principle of polarity also flips. Instead of trying to escape evil, we begin to see how all opposites are reconciled in a higher unity. Pain and healing are not enemies, they're gradients on the way back to love. In Hoffman's model, the interface becomes a teaching tool. Every icon becomes a pointer, not to fear or control, but to freedom. The barriers in the interface are not limitations, they are learning devices, opportunities to recognize the deeper truth. Nothing real can be threatened. You are not in a prison, you are in a classroom. Now, when a moment arises, filled with possible emotional outcomes, you collapse the wave in a new direction. You choose peace over defense, joy over justification. You forgive instead of attack. This shift changes everything. The world you see starts to reflect that choice, not always instantly, not always obviously, but you begin to tunnel through the old patterns. You bypass the barrier. You experience freedom where fear used to live. In the world of innocence, even physics becomes a parable. You don't need to argue that miracles are compatible with quantum mechanics. You see that quantum mechanics is a kind of miracle, a clue, an echo, a reminder that reality is more flexible, more loving, and more fluid than we'd imagined. Chapter 11. Choosing which laws you live under. To the mind trained by science, the idea that perception follows belief might seem soft, but the quantum world already hints at this. Observation influences outcome. Superposition collapses under measurement. Tunneling defies linear expectation. So why not consider, what if your belief in guilt makes the world appear as a prison? And what if your belief in innocence makes it appear as a playground? You don't have to abandon science to explore this. You just have to let science become a portal, not a prison. The tunneling particle is already showing you how. ACIM says miracles are natural. When they do not occur, something has gone wrong. What has gone wrong is usually our belief, not in math, but in ourselves, not in physics, but in love. If the world looks cold, violent, chaotic, it might not be because that's the nature of reality. It might be because we've chosen to live by a belief system grounded in guilt, punishment, and fear. But the same world viewed through the lens of innocence becomes different. In the quantum field of the heart, all possibilities are still alive. We are not collapsed particles, we are waves of light, tunneling through illusions, heading home. The quantum wave, the wave function that seems to hover in possibility before anything is real, has always been a rich metaphor. In quantum physics, it represents the probabilities of outcomes before a particle collapses into measurable form. In our lives, it's the space between decision, before judgment, before reaction. What if that wave is not neutral? What if, as A Course in Miracles teaches, the wave is inherently benevolent? What if every unfolding possibility that seems to confront us, even the ones we fear, is in fact an offering of healing? ACIM says all things are lessons God would have me learn. This is not a lesson in guilt or punishment, it is a lesson in healing, which implies that even when the wave collapses into something uncomfortable or challenging, it was never sent as an attack. It was only ever to call to return to love. Even more strikingly, ACIM affirms there is no cruelty in God and none in me. This implies a universe without vengeance, a universe without cruelty hiding behind natural law. The wave that seems to carry risk or sorrow is, in truth, innocent of all ill intent. The perception of danger is projected from guilt. The condemnation you perceive in the gaze of a passerby dissolves into neutrality. The truth, waiting quietly underneath, is always safe. What quantum mechanics shows us with equations, ACIM shows us with healing language. Possibility is not a threat. The apparent chaos of quantum probability is not chaos at all. It is a gentle invitation to choose again. God's will for me is perfect happiness. That includes every moment, every wave, every form that the world takes. The innocence of the wave lies in its origin. It is not born of judgment, but of love. Every tunneling particle is a parable of grace, an unseen journey across boundaries we imagined were real. ACIM emphasizes nothing real can be threatened, nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. That is the final instruction. What is real, love, spirit, and unity, cannot be harmed, and what can be harmed was never truly real. The laws we thought governed us, entropy, limitation, decay, are not the laws of our being. They are rules of the interface. The miracle, ACIM teaches, does not break the laws of God, it reveals them. Miracles are natural. When they do not occur, something has gone wrong. The wave does not come to trap you, it comes to offer you a miracle. Whether it collapses as a good day or a bad day, a healing or a wound, a connection or a loss, it is always offering only one thing, the chance to remember who you really are. You are a miracle, capable of creating in the likeness of your Creator. That means you are not a fixed particle, you are a living wave, not defined by the laws of guilt, but moving gently in the rhythm of grace. Chapter 10. A final invitation to tunnel home. So, are we all guilty or are we all innocent? If you believe in guilt, you will see a world of barriers. Even quantum particles will seem to move only under suspicion. But if you believe in innocence, not naive, blind innocence, but deep spiritual innocence, you will begin to see how even the most mysterious laws of physics are doorways. Into eternity where all is one, there crept a tiny mad idea at which the Son of God remembered not to laugh. That idea was guilt. That laugh, still waiting in the wings, is the beginning of healing. The tunneling wave is still moving, through every moment, through every boundary, through every illusion of separation. It is not here to punish you, it is not here to test you. It is only here to help you tunnel home. You are still as God created you. You are not the barrier, you are the wave, and you are free. If you've made it this far, I can imagine you might be asking, why is this guy going on about this guilt and innocence stuff right now? Can't he see we have bigger fish to fry? What with the world order seemingly collapsing around us? Yes, I see it. Climate breakdown, political polarization, economic precarity, institutional mistrust. It's all in plain view. It feels like the rules are breaking down. The old systems are tunneling into something new, or just dissolving altogether. But here's the thing. If the foundations we built our world on were false, if they were rooted in guilt, fear, and separation, then maybe their collapse isn't the end of the world. Maybe it's the end of a world, a guilty world. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly what we need. ACIM doesn't ask us to ignore the world, it asks us to reinterpret it. It teaches that we don't have a behavior problem, we have a perception problem. And behind every problem we think we face is the same root, the belief that we are guilty and separate from one another, from God, and from our true nature. So while it might seem off topic to talk about guilt and innocence in a world on fire, I'd argue it's the most relevant topic we could possibly engage in, because what you believe about guilt and innocence will determine how you respond to the collapse. If you believe we're all guilty, you'll double down on blame. You'll pick sides, call for vengeance, build more walls, metaphorically or otherwise. You'll demand sacrifice as the price for peace. You'll see enemies where there are cries for healing. But if you begin to entertain the possibility that we are all innocent, not perfect but fundamentally broken, then a different kind of world starts to open up. You'll forgive faster. You'll listen longer. You'll build bridges. You'll see the spark of something holy in places you used to see only dysfunction. You'll interpret attack as a call for love. You'll become a wave of sanity in a system that seems to be tearing itself apart. And here's the kicker. That shift, subtle as it is, it affects everything. According to A Course in Miracles, your mind is not a tiny private chamber. It's part of a vast quantum field of shared awareness. When you choose innocence, you're collapsing the wave of the world in a new direction. A miracle isn't just a personal reset, it's a systematic correction. So yes, the world looks rough, but if quantum mechanics has taught us anything, it's this. What looks like randomness on the surface often hides astonishing coherence underneath. What we need most right now isn't more cleverness or control, it's clarity. The clarity that comes from remembering the laws of guilt are not inevitable. The world can be perceived another way. The wave is still moving, and it's offering us a way through. The lesson to Sisyphus is pretty clear within this interpretation. Stop struggling with your past, and instead recognize that what God created cannot suffer, cannot be bound, and cannot be trapped. On one condition: accept yourself as innocent. Thank you for your time today. Bye-bye.